For a really long time I have been wanting to do a short quick video about how to knead dough, but you need different approaches if you have a wet dough, a dry dough, or a standard dough, or if you do it on a machine, or so it turned out to be a little long, this video. But I think it's actually worth it to see how dough. Oh, and I have a little something about gluten in the end that you might find interesting. The first thing I want to show is sort of the standard dough. This is the type of dough that you regularly bake. In Denmark this is the Danish French bread. And I just mix it on the tabletop. It's easier to do it in the ball. But I want to show that it's actually easy to work with this dough all the way through. I know some people has a lot of problem. I think it's too sticky. So I collect it all into a ball. And so all the ingredients are mixed now, and we have a loose ball of dough. And it becomes sticky really fast. If we try to knead it any regular way, it'll stick to your fingers, it'll stick to the table. But you do this technique that you use for all the doughs. You stretch it and you fold it. It pulls out the gluten and it puts air into the dough. You stretch it and you fold it. See, now I have kneaded about 5 minutes. It's not nearly as sticky now. Actually, it's easy to work with. And it's starting to form a gluten window. If you can see the light through your dough. If it can become thin enough for that, that's a gluten window. And then you know you are almost there, or you are there. I give this a little bit more. Now I think it's done. So I roll it into a ball, and notice I haven't added any extra flour. It doesn't stick to my fingers anymore compared to how it was when I started. And now I can leave it to rise. That's another video. Now I want to show how to hand knead a wet dough. This is a dough known from the No-knead bread. I call it the world's best bread. I have that recipe online too. So I mix it all in a ball. This is the easiest way. It's a little modern method. It's not used in bakeries because they would have to use too many balls, but for the home bakers, it's a very good process. So just mix it all with a spatula or scraper. Leave it to be for about 10 minutes. And then 3 or 4 rounds of this. Well, this is one round where I take the dough and fold it in over itself from the side. Again, it's a stretch and fold technique, but I use the scraper. This releases the gluten, and it's very suitable for wet dough. You cannot use it for a regular dough or a dry dough because the gluten won't work with you. There's some enzymes and some stuff that goes on in the dough that makes this viable for wet dough, but not for any other dough. So this is one round, and I have to do 3 or 4 of those. 10 minutes later, and I'm gonna show all the rounds. It might be a bit boring, I don't know, but I think it's important because it shows the difference, what happens to the flour. Notice it's already much more dough-like now and a lot more sticky. I can pull some long strings with the scraper. This is the sign that the gluten is being released from the flour. So that was another round. That was 2. And 10 minutes later, you see there's a little bit of yeast in it, so it is rising as well. We don't want to press out the air, so we do it a bit carefully. And it's becoming really dough-like now, and now it's starting to become less sticky. Releases my hands practically. And this, oh, I promise it's the last time now. Now it's a dough, and it's very well kneaded and with practically no effort. And if you want to make a sourdough bread, this is actually the best way to knead it. because you need a long time and a lot of water in the dough to make a good sourdough bread. I just want to show how it is to work with. It's a bit sticky and a bit lively, but actually it is possible to work with it now. Yeah. And so I want to show how to do a dry dough. This is typically a bagel dough or a dry French bread. I just mix it all in a bowl. Make sure that all the ingredients are collected from the bowl. And then I do the same technique again, stretch and fold. Stretch and fold. And typically when you start out baking, this is the dough you always end up with, because you put too much flour on the table. And then when you're done kneading, this is how the dough looks. And again, you can do it with 2 hands. You stretch and fold. Actually, it becomes one movement then. But it's absolutely the same principle, stretch and fold. You just do it in one motion with 2 hands. When you have a larger portion of dough, you have to use both hands to stretch and fold. Especially with this dry dough, because it's very difficult to knead. You really have to use your muscles. If you have the strength, you can use the 2-hand technique. The stretch and fold it once. And now I want to show how you can see if a dough is done. If I press, this should just pop out. You shouldn't really see the shape. It should spring back. It doesn't really do that, so I need to knead it a bit more. You can also see the dough is a bit rough on the surface, not really smooth. Now it's a little better. See, it springs back faster. There's not a lot of an impression left back. And now I have zoomed in to show the 2-hand stretch and fold technique a little more clearly. Stretch it and fold it. Stretch it and fold it, and naturally when you do it a lot faster. And now it springs back. This dough is ready. And we can do the window pane test. We see the light through. Yeah. Machine kneading. Then I start out with a paddle attachment on the stand mixer. This is a classical, it's a Kenwood or a stand mixer. There's a lot of brands that are like this. And this is again the no-knead recipe. I start up with the paddle attachment because it really moves some dough. And I use that for about 5 minutes. But I want to show double portion and show the problems with that on the stand mixer. It works really well, but it glues to the paddle and starts to crawl up the machine. So I changed the hook. Or I changed from the paddle to the hook attachment. This is the hook attachment. It has the advantage that the dough will not crawl up the length of it, and it will not stick to the machine. And actually it does make for a bit better kneading. See, it's very pretty and smooth now, the dough, and you can do the window test. It's easier to do the window test on a wet dough. This is the other type of kneading machine. I think it's called an Ankersund abroad. In Denmark it's just called the Assistant. So there's a special hook, dough hook, and now I want to make a double portion in this to show the difference. It's not really important for kneading, but it does show the difference on the machines. You can have a lot more dough in this one. It's the same principle, you just keep it going until it becomes smooth and nice. So it looks just as this. That's it, leave it to rise. And now I want to show a wet dough. It's actually the same dough that I kneaded in the bowl before. I want to show it on the table. It's more a classic. Well, mixing it on the table is not actually that classic. Typically it would be mixed in the bowl, but I wonder why not. Let's get real rustic here. Just mix it with a fork and mix in a little bit of the flour at a time. So even if you don't have a ball, you can make a dough. It takes a bit of time to do it right, and you risk overrunning and it running down the side of your kitchen table if you do it on the table, so you should probably not do it. But I want to show that even a really wet and sticky dough can be worked with and can be kneaded by hand. This is why I do it. I collect it all, and I have a large scraper for this. It's especially for bread. And this punching technique is really good for mixing initial dough. I use that for my pie crust as well, this technique. I collect it into a ball. Well, a puddle, more like it. Again, this is the no-knead bread. And see, it's really, really sticky. It's actually more like a porridge. So I use the scraper and my hand at the same time. Otherwise it will soon end up as a very thin layer on my kitchen table. It takes about 10 minutes. And I use the same technique, and I stretch and I fold. In the wet dough you can just pull a line of dough, stretch and fold, stretch and fold. And it's the irony of this is that the wet dough is actually a much easier to knead than a dry or a medium dough. Once you get the technique right and know what you're supposed to do. Now I have let it rest for 10 minutes. You have to do that on the middle of the table, as you can see, otherwise it'll float down the side of it. But notice how it draws a curtain of dough when I pull it. It's very elastic. It's very soft and nice. And I'll do it one more time. So yeah, I have 3 turns on this. You can take 4 too, but I do a little more kneading in the beginning, so really only 3 turns is necessary at this end. And now it's very obvious that it's a very elastic and sticky dough. And that's how to do it on the table. That's what I think was necessary to know about kneading. Stop. There's more. I did tell you I have a little something about gluten. In this following part of the video I show how to extract gluten from your flour, from your dough, and what gluten looks like and how it works, and why it makes bread so airy and fluffy as it is. And yeah, it's easy, I show you. Regular white flour consists mostly of protein and starch. Most of the protein, or a lot of it at least, is gluten, and I want to show how that gluten actually looks like. So this is the dough I used in the kneading example with the machine, with the rotating ball. I put that into a water bath on top of a strainer, and then I wash it out. You would think that when you add some dough into water, it will just dissolve. Like when you make a sauce thickener by adding flour to water, it's just liquid. But actually this has been kneaded and it has been left to rise for about an hour. So the gluten has been pulled out of the flour. It's a separate part of the dough now. We can see that when we wash it like this, that it has a lot of strings and it becomes rubbery. And I think it's really interesting to see the process. I'm washing out more and more of the white stuff that ends up in the water, that is the starch. What I'm left with here is the gluten. And it gets better, just wait. This is the first wash. And this is a classic recipe to get protein out of flour. It has been used by Asian monks for centuries, or so I've read. It's probably true. Vegetarians use this for their They're fake meats. So I save this starch. I let it rest overnight, and then I'll show it to you later. Don't worry, I'll edit the video so you don't have to wait. I wash it again, and now it starts actually to really come together, to become really rubbery. It's very, very obvious that there's not that much starch left in it. The water is not as white, and it becomes white a lot less quickly, and we can collect it into a ball. See, this has a completely different consistency than just the dough. And when doing your dishes after making a dough, this is what is so hard to wash out. You can see it's really elastic. I wash it one last time. See, this is almost like a piece of meat, and naturally, since it's protein, and actually when you bake it, a piece like this, it smells a little of bacon. And see, you cannot do this with a regular dough normally. So it's a bit of a rubber now, and that's what makes gluten so effective. And notice the size of this. It's about a snowball. It fits right into my hand, and you can see what happens when I bake it later. There's no yeast or anything like this. See how elastic it is? This is from 2 no-knead breads. There's only this little gluten in that large portion of dough. So I roll it into a ball, and I leave it to rest for about 20 minutes. And this is the same that happens with the dough. Notice how the structure changes. It becomes smooth and fine. It becomes a little looser, and now I can roll it again. It was a bit hard before. Notice the shiny surface. This is just gluten. When I bake it, it becomes this big. I think that's pretty amazing, isn't it? There's no yeast in this. It's only heat, water and air that has made it swell up this much. Now I let it cool off a bit. So now I should perhaps have baked it a bit more, but I'm not gonna eat this. You see, all the gluten structure. This is where the name gluten structure comes from. This comes naturally, and not by yeast or anything. This is simply the heat of the oven that does this. That's why it's very important to knead. Isn't it fascinating? And see the starch in the bottom of this? It has rested for about 12 hours. So I pour off the water. Then this is the starch. And it's a non-Newtonian fluid. We see like cornstarch and potato starch. When you squeeze it, it becomes hard, and then it becomes soft when you let it be. And this is obviously not the same as the gluten. So that's all. And you can find the list of ingredients and the recipe on kvalifood.